What's happening, YouTube? In today's video, we're going to be putting two fantastic guitars head to head. I have the 1961 Gibson SG with vibrola and the 1960s Les Paul Standard. Both of these guitars are equipped with burst bucker pickups, orange drop capacitors, which means that the pickups and the wiring is essentially the same. I've also strung these with the same exact strings. These are Elixir NanoWeb 1046s. So for all intents and purposes, these should sound exactly the same. But I know already from playing them, they don't. And I'm kind of trying to figure out why that is. So in today's video, we're going to put them head to head. And maybe if you know more than me about guitars, you probably do. Maybe you can tell me what that difference is and why it exists. Now, beyond the sound of the guitars, there's a clear winner to me when it comes to ergonomics, and that has got to be the Gibson SG. The SG is so much more comfortable to play. It has a much thinner profile. The 61 reissue also has a double cutaway up here. And then it even has a belly cut here that makes it a lot more comfortable for it to lay against your body. I find that when I play my Les Paul, no matter where I string it, it's either bumping into my hip or it's bumping into my rib cage, and it can be a little cumbersome. The other major thing, ergonomically speaking, is the weight of the guitar. This SG, I think, weighs just about 7 pounds, whereas my Les Paul is over 9.5 pounds. A 2.5 pound difference doesn't sound that bad, but when you're playing for a long time, I did notice my Les Paul definitely starts cutting into my shoulder, and in some of our marathon practice sessions, my fingers were actually starting to go numb from, I guess, cutting off something, a nerve, blood flow, whatever. Whereas the SG, I feel like I can wear it and play it forever, and it's not going to cause any sort of impact on my body. From a looks perspective, I think the SG just looks mean. It's got a much more like heavy rock and roll look to it. Maybe it's the devil horns. Maybe it's just because we associate this with guys like Angus Young, AC/DC, and some heavier rock and roll groups, traditionally speaking, or even Santana, playing one of these at Woodstock. But if you want something that's going to make more of a statement, I feel like the SG, just on appearance alone, definitely does that. Now, the Les Paul is also an excellent guitar. The Les Paul was interesting in its development, where it came out at a time where it was kind of more oriented towards jazz music and playing with an ensemble of people, not necessarily being like the lead instrument. However, as Les Pauls were getting really popular towards the beginning, middle, and end of the 1950s and into the 60s, we start to see real rock and roll happening, not just like Bill Haley and the Comets and doo-wop stuff. We start to get some acts that are pushing what a guitar can do. And the Les Paul, for all intents and purposes, really held up in doing that. But when it came time to modernize, Gibson came out with the SG, which Les Paul himself actually hated. Which is why for a while, once the Les Paul went away, players sought these things because the design departure was so drastic from what had existed prior that it was shocking to some fans of Gibson and the instruments that they made. I do think the Les Paul is a beautiful guitar, especially if you get it in a nice burst. This is the bourbon burst on the 60s standard reissue here. This is also a demo shop guitar, and you can check my other video about that. The demo shop is awesome. If you're looking to buy a new guitar that is authentic from Gibson for a pretty decent discount. You can find that on Reverb, and I'll link that in the description in case you're interested in looking at it. This guitar has absolutely nothing wrong with it when it comes to the wiring, when it comes to the pickups, when it comes to the playability. That said, there are some cosmetic defects that you would need a microscope to find, and because of that, Gibson knocked the price down pretty significantly. I want to say I probably paid about 70% of the actual sticker price for a non-demo shop Les Paul. So now, without further ado, let's put these two guitars head to head. First, we're going to hit some clean tones, and I'm going to have all the settings at about 5. Because as we'll see, once you start to really push it, the two sounds do really start to kind of converge to the same place, especially on the second part of this test, when we start adding overdrive and we start adding a little bit of gain to it. So if you've made it this far in the video, that means that you've heard all the tones, the shootout between the two different guitars, and to me personally, there is a clear winner here, and it's got to be the Les Paul. I don't know why. Again, with virtually identical pickups, absolutely identical strings, and I think mostly the same wiring and all the same capacitors and stuff and pots and all that, somehow this sounds better to my ear. But that's the important part. What sounds good to me might not sound good to you, and depending on what sort of music you're playing, well, that's going to influence which one you're going to pick up. I think the Les Paul is awesome for a great classic rock sound. If you want a lot of sparkle, if you want a lot of punch in drive, this is a fantastic guitar because it does a really good job of not only sustaining, but holding its pitch. Whereas I feel the SG starts to get a little flat and muddy really early. And if you're playing in a group setting where you're kind of fighting for your sonic space between everybody else, I feel like the SG can get lost a little bit. However, if you're playing heavier stuff, which, I don't know, maybe this is opinion, but you're going to be in lower keys or you're going to be in drop tunings and stuff, I feel like this is where the SG kind of shines because to my ear, it's a guitar that's made to be in a bit of a darker genre, if that makes sense. It doesn't have the sparkle, it does have a little bit of the drive, but it doesn't have as much like punch through as the Les Paul has. But at the same time, you can make some really amazing, mellow, almost like jazzy, dark rock-ish sort of tones with it. And so I think it definitely has its place. The Les Paul, especially in the genre of music that I'm playing, which is like a lot of pop rock, 90s alt, whatever, it just does better. It does a much better job of elevating itself above the sound mix. It just does a much better job of being present against a full band for whatever reason. Whereas when we first started playing together, I only had an SG and this is what I brought, and it kind of tended to get lost. And I think that's because of its mellower sort of tone and the way it doesn't have the same clarity that the Les Paul does. So thank you guys so much for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe. Let's discuss down below, which guitar do you think sounded better? Am I totally off basis with what I'm saying? I'd love to engage with you in a polite way, of course. So anyway, see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching. Ciao for now.